So moving on from project management, now let's look at the way in which we identify challenges within our practices and opportunities that we can address through the use of analyzing the data in which, well, the copious amounts of data in which our architectural practices produce, but never actually take benefits of. So now we're at session 14. And I'm really excited now to have Rosey Alexander from Bond Bryan here to talk to you and share with you some of her golden nuggets uh, from the way in which she works with data within Bond Bryan to assist their owners within the practice to make decisions about how they move forward. So let's sit back over the next 40 minutes and see some of the insights that Rosey can give us in regards to how Bond Bryan are embracing data and how they're using it to change the way they're working within their architectural practice. So take it away, Rosey.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. Hope you're safe and well. Today we're talking about information, data, and I'll use those two terms interchangeably throughout the presentation. You may have heard phrases like data is the new gold or the new oil. We use more terms to describe information now than we used to 5-10 years ago. We talk about data lakes, data mines, as if data is something that we can extract, that we can charge money for, that it has a value. It's true to say that data is everywhere. The amount of data that we're exchanging, that we're swapping, that we're finding, that we're using is exponential compared to 10 years ago. When we think about our architectural practice, the amount of information that it takes to create the projects that we work on. This is Sheffield University Heartspace building. It's a complexly serviced refurb and infill project at Sheffield University that Bond Bryan designed. The amount of data and information it takes for that project to come to fruition, to be built, is phenomenal. Some of it's on our drawings, some of it's in our BIM models, in our ArchiCAD models, but there's also information that goes into costing, goes into quantities. There's data for lots and lots of purposes, and all of us are working with it every day, to greater or lesser extents. Some people are very data focused. Your average information manager is handling a lot of information and is focusing on that for most of their role. Whereas some of us, if we're more design orientated, we might be thinking less about data, but even when we're designing, we're effectively still creating data. There are different ways that information is generated. Some of it is created. When you model a wall in ArchiCAD, you're creating data because you're creating information about its height, its width. Later on in the project or at some particular time, you might be allocating information. You're choosing to allocate that door is door number 102. You're choosing to allocate that wall is of a certain type. So that data is then attached to that wall as well as the information that you created to start with. But some information doesn't exist in that way, and it can be calculated from other things. The length of skirting along that wall can be calculated from the length of the wall minus where the door is. You don't have to be modelling that skirting board in infinite detail in order to work out the length of that skirting. And in many times you don't want to, you don't need to. If you've modelled all the skirting on that wall, that's great. But not if this is your project. That's far too much modelling to be able to handle, to be able to keep track of along the life of the project. Whereas if you're using calculated information, then the walls can move around, the spaces can change, the rooms can be reordered without you having to modify all that skirting board. There's not just BIM data and ArchiCAD data. We have an awful lot of information in our architectural practices that comes from a whole variety of sources about our projects, our finances, our human resources, our staff that we use in the practice, all the people that we interact with, our clients, our contacts, our business development information. And this can be stored in a wide variety of places. It might be in file folders on servers, it might be in a database, it's in the cloud, it's on a hard drive. Not so much now, it's on a piece of paper somewhere. Not so long ago, we had much fewer sources of information. So at Bond Bryan, most of our information was contained within our ArchiCAD models. That was then taken across to Celebri to do class detection, coordination. And most of the rest of our practice information was contained in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. A lot has changed. We're using a lot more different sources these days of information, and we're connecting them together in many different ways. This is an indication of how our practice information is now organised. Yes, we've still got an awful lot in ArchiCAD, a lot in Celebri, but now that goes across to BIMTrack or BIMCollab. A lot of our information is in the cloud or on software that's accessed through the cloud. A-Site, we use Rapport from Cubic Interactive. That's a lot of our practice management data, which then goes through to PowerBi. That's connected to Excel as well. So there's many more software solutions or technology solutions that connect all our data together. And the way that these are connected together is a little bit like we use the best solution for each of the processes or the actions that we're doing at the time. So we're not plumping for one great big solution from one vendor. We're actually knitting all of these softwares together to manage our information. For example, a lot of our project data and our timesheets and our fees is stored in Rapport. That's a practice management piece of software. But we add to that, we've got fee profiles and who's in which team within our staff as Excel documents. We then knit that together in PowerBi, and that's where we're then looking at our turnover, our profit and loss, monitoring our sector diversities, and perhaps looking at projects in other ways, like a location heat map to see where are our projects. Those then are connected to our company intranet. There's a solution called Twine. And that's where we're then using that profit and loss, the sector diversity, to develop our business development strategies, our company objectives. As another example, Bond Bryan Digital, with their information hub, they're gathering data from Airtable, for example, the contact details of people working on a project team. They're using Whimsical to do process diagrams, bolting the two of those things together using Notion, which then they can use to create the project directory as part of their information hub that they use for information management. And then they're exporting some of that in other places. So they'll use that same project directory exported to somewhere else for their COBie contact sheet. Data really is everywhere. The tricky thing is insights are not. It's harder to find those glimpses of gold within our businesses when we've got so much data knitted together. Information is meant to be shared, not hoarded. Information is always for a purpose. There's a reason it exists, and different people will use it in different ways depending on their role. Some software vendors will tell you that you need all of your information in one place. You need everything knitted together to make one large data set, one large BIM model with everything in it. But what that's doing is saying that the information represented here by that yellow square is being passed from one person to another. And as it gets passed on, it grows with more and more people putting more information together until the person at the end of the chain has got a huge amount of information to manage. What's more true is actually the information does grow as it moves throughout the process, from the initial brief all the way to the project being built. But now what's happening is all these different software solutions and sources of information are feeding into that, and we're seeing a much more connected ecosystem where information is transferred according to its use and its need. The trouble with that is you have to have an understanding of how the information is put together, is made up, and what purposes it's going to be used for. And this is increasingly complex the more information we're trying to manage. This is a diagram of how the information of HS2, the high-speed rail in the UK, is put together and where that data comes from and how it's connected. Looks pretty complex. But another way of looking at an information system, IFC. This is the model view definition from IFC. We have this poster on the wall in the office. The information is connected and ordered, and it has a system, and that makes it easier to understand and to use. So all the information you have in architectural practice, you have to have an understanding of where all your information is. Who's got hold of it? Where's it being shared? How's it connected together? Only then can you use it for other purposes. For example, when coronavirus hit, we had data put together from a variety of sources. As I said, we use Report and then PowerBi. So we had got dashboards looking at our turnover, understanding where the fees in the practice were coming from. At the point at which the UK went into lockdown, everybody at Bonbrine picked up their computers and walked out, went home. Setting up the technology for everybody to work from home was relatively simple. But also what we were able to do, because we had good connected data, was we were able to see and predict what impact the coronavirus would have on our fees. And what we were able to do, we had dashboards that were tracking where all of our fees were coming in. And this is made up of every single project has a billing plan on it with what is going to be invoiced every month. When coronavirus hit and we were all at home, we needed to work out what we thought the effect of that was going to be on the business. Now, with 200 projects on the books, it would be very tricky for all of our project leads to be manipulating their billing plans and moving the money around to predict what the impact on our fees might be. So instead, because we'd got that good understanding of where our data was and how it was all connected together, what we were able to do almost overnight, I say almost, it was a couple of rather long nights, but almost overnight, what we did was added 4 more fields to our report system, just to say, what do we think is going to be the impact in, this is April 2020, May and then June? Do we think these projects are going to stop? Are they going to slow down? We asked everybody just to fill in these 4 fields on their project. So they weren't manipulating a huge amount of data, they were just filling in 4 small pieces of information. And that meant we were able to then predict what was likely to happen to our fee income. And we predicted that it went down by about 10%. We weren't far off. Although this is a modification of the data at quite a high level, because we understood how the data was knitted together, that meant we could manipulate it, share it, change it, and use it for a new purpose that we hadn't even thought of before. So share your data, understand where it is, how it can help somebody else, how it can help you, how it can be used for different purposes. All this talk of data sounds as though it might be disconnected from people. And data in its simple sense isn't complicated. There might be complicated ways we connect it together, but the much more complicated aspect of architectural practice is people. People are complicated. They think creatively. They communicate through inference. That means they're taking an understanding of how different parts go together and inferring decisions. They're detecting patterns, making sense of the world. People are inconsistent. It's really tricky to get a group of people to behave in the same way. But that's just how people are. And when you're trying to put together dashboards or putting together PowerBi stuff, it makes a lot of sense when you understand that you have to create things that people can behave consistently with. People also can get bored. Computers, on the other hand, don't. They follow instructions. They have a limited hardwired knowledge. You have to tell them how to behave and what to do. But they can calculate a huge amount of information quickly. They'll do it consistently and they won't lose focus. A computer would love this. It's a set of information. It's a big spreadsheet of data. Humans don't interact well with this kind of data vomit. In order for humans to find patterns to make inference in this, it has to be somehow human readable. This is a PowerBi sheet. This is a step forward because it's clearly organized in a certain way. There are colors that mean something. And this makes it easier for humans to understand and interpret this data. But even better, this is courtesy of Andrew Waring at Holmes Miller, a friend of mine. He's taking the data from PowerBi sheets. He's also taking it from Revit models. He's using a lot of Dynamo and PowerBi to understand the data that he's got. So it's taking information that could have just lived in spreadsheets and taking a much more dashboard approach to it. For example, a number of spaces and then checking those spaces to see whether they're PowerBi compliant and giving you a reporting of a percentage on that. So he's very much showing you the data in a much more human readable, understandable way. What's particularly good about this, if you look, there are goals. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is what is a reasonable amount of data that's in good shape. At Bonbrian, we've got a particular way of making sure that we get the best data we can and that people in the business can understand it and interact with it inside the ArchiCAD models in the most human readable way. So we use the classification to drive the available properties for a particular element. So a partition wall will have a certain number of properties, including fire rating. And then that fire rating will have, we use option sets on almost everything because we're trying to limit what people can decide to put in. Like we said, people are inconsistent. So having the fire rating as a drop-down option set means that they just can choose 30. That means we're not getting 30 min, 30 minutes, 30 mins, 30, fire rating 30 minutes, all of those different instances. So we're controlling what people can input and therefore what we output. The other thing we're then doing with this is using a lot of graphic overrides. So we want people to interact with the data. a couple of versions ago on our template, we would have all of the information that we wanted people to add to their ArchiCAD models as one long list. You can see here we're now splitting it much more into what is required and what is optional at each RBA stage. And the next step on from this is we're asking people to review that data. So we're actually using graphic overrides for data validation effectively. What are your fire ratings? Where are they? What have you allocated within your model and what's unallocated? So we're giving people tools to interact with the data without having to behave like a computer. We're letting them still behave like a human being with all their inconsistencies, hoping they don't get bored while they produce good models. And then we're using different bits of data and visualizing them in different ways. So we don't use zone categories anymore. We only have one zone category and it's plain white. What we're then doing is choosing to classify each of those spaces and then using a graphic override to colour it up. So for schools, in the UK, they tend to be organised a certain way. So classrooms are orange and offices are turquoise. So we're just using an override to show that information in a different way. What we also make sure we do is that all of our favourites and all of our template is set up so that by default, the data is undefined. And that has a graphic override that turns it a bright yellow. So if you look at RBA stage 4, we're saying that the acoustic rating of all of those walls is undefined. We want people to make a positive choice to put that data in because they're sure of it, because they've checked it, because they've talked to the fire engineer about the fire rating of walls. They've talked to the acoustician to work out which wall needs to be a certain rating. So in the template, it'll all be bright yellow until you've made the positive choice to put the correct data in. This isn't foolproof. We've had staff who have seen their model go bright yellow and edited the graphic override to turn it all grey instead. People are people. They're always going to interact with templates and how we intended they behaved in their own special way. But with a bit of training, a bit of understanding, we can then teach them that making choices in the data will then impact not just what you put on the drawings, but how you're viewing that model and then the data that you're passing on to other people. So data isn't complicated. It's people that are complicated. Actions speak louder than dashboards. All this information, even if it's in a human readable form, is there for a purpose. You're wanting someone to take action because of that information. There are lots of dashboards out there that at first glance might look like a lovely dashboard. Look at this, it looks brilliant, lovely colours. But then when you start to squint a bit harder, you think, hang on, what do these colours mean something? Things that are bigger in size or have a signal colour, so reds, orange, yellow, in this case purple, will jump out at you. And on this dashboard, actually, that purple looks like it's being used consistently in different visuals, whereas in fact it's not. The purple on the column chart means mountain rather than Pacific area. This is a travel dashboard. But on another dashboard, it means that people went in coach instead of business class. So you have to think about how your data is being viewed by people and what action they're going to take off on the basis of it. You could spend a lot of time making a very clever looking dashboard. But if all it tells you is, here is the data, so what? It doesn't call you to action. It doesn't encourage you to do something. Don't get me started on pie charts. A pie chart, if it's got too many things on it, that is meaningless data. Doesn't matter what this is tracking. It doesn't tell you to do something. It doesn't give you information that you need to act on. It doesn't encourage you to make a decision. Put it a different way, colour it up in a different way, tasks by status. That bright red of overdue tasks is telling you to do something. So that's a much more useful visual. Here's an even better one. ourworldindata.org. Global greenhouse gas emissions by sector. So this is a pie chart on steroids because it's a pie chart with another pie chart with another pie chart. And it's beautiful looking data, but it's actually, the way it's broken down makes it easy to use, makes it easy to communicate to people who can then take action. Within our business, we're using information not just in ArchiCAD, in our BIM models and information management. This is practice management, and we've spent a lot of time and effort putting our data together, making sure it's connected and validated, and we can use it in the ways that we need to take action, to make decisions. And what we tend to do is start off with those plain language questions. What are you trying to find out? What do you want to do with your data? What's it trying to answer? One of the best ones came from one of our team leaders, John Rigby, Associate Director. Very simple question. How can I review the extra hours my team are putting in? We knew we'd got the timesheet data. It was going into report. I knew I could suck it through into PowerBi. In its simplest form, just take that data and have a little look. So here's a simple table. There's the staff names, there's the timesheet, the hours that they've done, and how much extra time that they've done on projects. So over and above their core hours, their normal working hours. That, in simple terms, answered John's question. How many extra hours are my team doing? But that's not as useful as it could be. Even better if you then say, well, what's good, what's bad? What's something we need to take a look at? What is too much? That can then lead you to take action, to say, well, let's go and have a chat with that staff. John, as a team leader, is having one-to-ones with staff. He knows who's overloaded through human interaction. But what we're actually looking for, and the better question that actually we were asking is, where are the patterns? How do I tell somebody that is consistently overloaded or behaving in a certain way? So what we then did was take that data and put it into a column chart. So we can see we've decided the green line is your normal working hours, and we changed the data so this accounted for people who are part-time and full-time. And what we were looking at is the patterns. You're looking at who's doing extra time all the time. What's causing them to take that decision to do that extra time? Are they on too many projects? Have they not got enough other staff helping them? Are they the sort of person that will always put extra time in because that's their kind of personality? So looking at patterns and looking at the information in a different way is helping us to make better decisions in our practice. Even better that we then have metrics on top of this. So what's the average? How much extra are people doing across the board? And we can, the way we have our dashboard set up, we can slice this and dice this by different months, by different disciplines, by different teams. But what we're looking for is this good or bad? Do we need to do something about it? Do we need to investigate a little further? This is leading you to take action, not just to review data. When I talked about connected data and understanding how your information is built up and how people interact with it, we have dashboards that track where our fees are coming from, our turnover, and those are built up from 200 projects where the project leads have entered what fees are coming into the business for each month across the year. When we were talking to the business development and marketing team, they've got so many more projects going on, not all of which will then come to fruition. They need in a much faster way of being able to generate an understanding of the fee income. So understanding how their role was using the data or inputting the data or interacting with the data, we gave them 5 magic fields to fill in. All we were asking for is the project scope, when's the fee going to start, how long is it going to last, and what is that fee, and how likely is it to come off. We've got algorithms, an Excel spreadsheet, in the background that then takes that data and generates a fee profile without you having to plan out every month, which then goes back into the PowerBi and is put together with the live projects where we have got all the information filled in. And those two things together give us a much better picture of what's going on. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all. This isn't requesting perfect data from lots of people and then trying to knit it together in a complicated way. This was going, how do we take good, reliable data and also take the behaviour that we're understanding that people need to use and need to do every day and merge that in as well? Because we don't want the staff who are out trying to win projects to be focusing just on filling in data. We want them to be out chasing the next Bon Ryan project, the next opportunity. We want them to be generating this kind of impact within our business. So the data helps them to do that, but we have to help them as human beings to understand and interact with that data and to make it so that it is useful to them and useful to us and can be used by other people for other purposes. So what I've talked about today is the fact that data is everywhere, and more than ever, we have got an awful lot going on and an awful lot of information connected together, shared between us, passed on from one place to another, manipulated, transferred. It all has human interaction. Even with AI, we're still looking for patterns in that data. We're looking for changes in behaviour. We're looking for something that generates a positive action. And only when you have that understanding of the data and how humans are interacting with it and what they do with that information within your practice, within your BIM models, within ArchiCAD, only then have you got data gold. Thank you very much. I'll now hand back to Nathan for Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Rosie. The number of architectural practices that I know that have their hands on so much data and don't know how to turn it into information and then don't know how to communicate it, it's scary. And it's great to see your insights and how you are handling that with Bon Brian at the moment. And once again, I think the crazy comments are on it in here, and there's not a lot of real questions coming forward from the audience tonight. They're a little bit cold, or maybe they've had a few too many drinks on a Friday night here in Australia. I don't know, but there was one query from Sharon wanting a copy of the IFC map. I don't know what the IFC map is that she's talking about. Rosie, do you know?
That's the IFC model view definition. Actually, I found that quite tricky to find. I got it from a colleague of mine. I couldn't find it online either. So maybe that's something that UK BIM Alliance or somebody can put that up there. But if you want a copy, DM me on Twitter and I'll...
I did personally create an IFC entity type document the other week with all of the stuff ripped off the Building Smart website for a specific client, and it took a good couple of days to put it together, but I found it worth it. And speaking to a colleague of mine, John Merchant, he said, "Did you do that manually?" And I said, "Yes." And he's a computer scientist. He said, "Never do that again." He said, "I can rip that in 2 seconds for you." So make sure you speak to the right person when you're playing with data, and they might be able to do things a lot easier. Now, this is a nice controversial one. I love it when we have colleague banter on public chat. You know, do you the fact that you and Rob have been separated physically for so long over this COVID period, have the boxing gloves come out virtually, you're calling his data vomit. What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm calling it data vomit if you put it out there as that kind of, the screenshot shows just like the big data table with, nothing to it. Just because humans don't react well to that. And that's what I tease Rob about sometimes, that he's, fabulous at putting the data together, really robust data sets, really robust processes. But I push him on the front end side of it, what the user sees. So I'll challenge him on that, and then he'll challenge me back on having my stuff in a robust way. And I'm saying, we don't need half of that because the users don't need it. And he'll say, put it in there because somebody somewhere is going to need it. Have the robust data set, but then organise it in a way that it's easy for people to understand and find.
So then in many ways, having the two personalities of yourself and Rob within Brian actually is a huge positive because of the way in which you both think slightly differently and you bring slightly different skill sets together to actually kind of be very data focused and very output focused.
Absolutely. And I'm sure he'd say the similar kind of thing. He'd get annoyed at me when I'm not behaving how he wants me to, but that's the beauty of it. We're challenging each other and we're constantly pushing it forward. I'm sure, Rob really wants to get into putting some of the PowerBi side of things to BIM Collab, BIM Track, some of the outputs from his information hub. So that'll be another goal for us over the next year or so, is to actually use what we've learned and then merge the things together. So that's all positive.
All right. So William's got a question. The architect's adding all the information to the element to make the yellow to coloured elements. I didn't catch that part of your presentation to understand that specific comment.
So we've got, the part of the presentation was that by default we have it so that all of our data fields are set to undefined.
Yep.
So for example, your fire rating is undefined, and that means that the graphic override, takes undefined as its first criteria and says if it finds undefined, turn it yellow. Yes. Which means when you start in modelling, you've not chosen your fire ratings, it's all yellow. But so then
it's telling the user that they actually have to make an action. They have to make a decision and apply it so that the data is right within the model.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now they can still ignore the graphic override. They can still say, yeah, that's just the BIM stuff. We don't bother with that. You can't completely change human behaviour amongst everybody, but it encourages you, because when they see that yellow, they understand yellow means there's something I need to do.
Well, it's like trying to teach a dog to wee in the right spot, right? but I'm sorry, it's been a few hours. But I know I've lost the plot. I've lost my chain of thought with that. But that's what the yellow comes to mind. I really like your approach with using a single zone type and then using graphic overrides based on classification. It simplifies the whole process a whole great deal. We've now started to get people from Brazil online. They're waking up over on the Americas side of things.
Yeah, the thing with the zones is interesting actually, because once you go single zone category and they have to classify a zone in order to generate coloured floor plans, which is obviously what you're doing early on in the scheme.
Yes.
I spent quite a lot of time trying to work out the colours, because I was trying to get colours that were going to be okay on lots of different platforms, that were standard, colours that are out there that actually have names. we've got colourblind staff. I was swapping to a colourblind view mode to check that when they looked at the graphic override, they could actually tell one thing from another.
And that's an important thing that people forget about as well. So that's a really important point you make about that.
And then just trying to make sure that it was always going to make a positive behaviour. So I totally accept that with the best will in the world, I can make a beautiful data structure behind the scenes, and I can allocate, I can make favourites and I can make colours the best way that's going to represent the classification, or the fire compartment, or whatever data you're trying to represent. And there's always going to be somebody in the practice that goes, I don't like that shade of green.
That's architects for you, isn't it? We all like our own things the way that we want them.
And you have to look at it from how it looks on a plan, because you might have two shades of green that look quite different from each other. But if you put them at opposite ends of a building, you can't actually tell that that's two different things.
Or if you print it out, so some printers don't print some colours very well. Is that a consideration as well? Now, Sebastian asked the question, how many standards and type of standards do you have? Do you create your own too? Now, that's a bit ambiguous.
That is a bit ambiguous. Does it mean standards in terms of...
Standards in British standards, or standards internal in the office? Well, I'll wait and see if you can put some more detail on that question, Sebastian, in the chat. But Gabriel's asking, so can you use ArchiCAD data or BIMCloud data to keep track of staff hours?
Do you know, there's so much I would love to be able to do more with BIMCloud. We have it so that people are putting their timesheets in on Rapport. So we've got quite sneaky with that. We've learned a few lessons because we really wanted to track what extra time people were doing. But there's quite a lot of behaviour that people just go, yeah, I was on that project just standard 37.5 hours a week. And they'll put the same, or 40 hours a week, and they'll put the same 40 hours every week. And you go, pretty sure you're not doing a straight 40, any of you.
Yeah.
We actually had an opportunity at the end of last year to do something a little bit sneaky. We said that in order for people, because we let people roll over more holidays from 2020, because nobody had been on holiday, we said you can keep more holidays, roll them into 2021. And we said, in order for us to update how many holiday days you've got, all we need is for you to get your timesheets up to date. So it's like, the system wasn't stopping us doing that, but it encouraged people to get the timesheets up to date. Then they could have their proper holiday allocation. And now that we're on top of that data, now it's easier to keep on top. And you can say, if you fall a week behind, somebody gives you a nudge.
We had timesheets. We had timesheet Nazis all the time with keeping things up to date. But from my perspective, it's very hard to try and track that specifically within ArchiCAD, the people's time. And I know that there's some crazy people. I know that through my work with Built, the conference series, and DBEI, that there are some crazy people that build tracking stuff for Autodesk products. Cornelius, zone colours, should we just accept colours supplied with our standard supplied Australian template? I'll answer that one for you, Rosie. You don't have to. You can, at the end of the day, the zone colours are just there as a base, as an example of what you can use for your workflows. If you have client requirements that spaces need to be certain colours, and I can tell you now that with education projects here in Queensland that I worked on, we had certain standards that we worked to and presenting certain room types at certain colours. So it depends on your client. So you can do what you want to do when it comes to the zone colours. And I'm assuming the same thing is the case in the UK. There might be different clients have different colour needs.
Yeah, so the education schemes have a particular colour requirement for their spaces, but many other projects don't. So that's, up to the architect to choose. What we're trying to do is get a little bit more consistency in the practice so that different projects from different offices don't, they still have a similar colourway to them.
Yeah.
But it's not implemented as you have to do this in green.
Yeah.
If there is a standard and if it's in the client requirements, we'll stick to it. But there is still some flexibility.
Yeah, I don't like flexibility. I like being really stringent with my standards so that it's all consistent, looks the same. Now, Macno at Lilywall SE. I guess you're also stressing Graphisoft to make it possible to pull data from ArchiCloud database directly connecting to BI. I know that Graphisoft have opened up everything for API access into ArchiCAD, and they can pull an immense amount of data. And a really good example of that, and I haven't shown this in my presentation later in the AM here in Brisbane, but Enscape has the ability to, when you click on an element, you can bring up all the data associated with it, so you can see how much data actually lives within ArchiCAD that APIs can have access to. So there's an amazing amount of data. There's a tool here in Australia called BIM Beats that's been developed that is trying to understand what's loading up server running Revit projects currently. They're working to build that tool so it can analyze against Bentley, Tekla, and eventually onto ArchiCAD. So they are working through those things. But Rosey, one final question, because we've got to do a big changeover again for the final thing. So I need a few more extra minutes as an ad break. But one of the things that I really love about, so there's information within projects that you've touched on, and that's something that Rob's very focused on. But the thing that I think is really mission critical is information. So first of all, there's so much data that practices have at their fingertips. Then they generate information, then they kind of forget the final step, which is actually putting it in a way that the information becomes readable and then actioning against. I know personally through my experience the lack of interest or lack of ability for a business owner to sit down and actually make action against information that is presented to them that should be action to make things better. Since you've been doing this task and since you've been presenting, project profitability or project forecasting in the graphical format you have with Power BI, what change has it made? Has it made a positive change on your practice?
Yeah, we've made a tremendous change in where the information is shared, because we've shared it amongst much more junior members of staff. The amount of information, both financial and sort of performance data, that goes much further down the business means that everybody's more aware of what's going on. It's not just give everybody all the information, it's give the people information that is relevant to them and that they can action. So we've got more people looking at resource planning, between the teams. We've got more people who are monitoring aged debt and actually realising what effect that has and chasing clients to pay the bills that are owed. Yeah. So there's lots of instances where we always started with the plain language questions. What the plain language question is, well, how do we improve this? How can I see this? What can I do about this? And you have to keep that in mind, because whichever way you display the data, whichever way you colour it up, you're still looking for a specific reaction. You're looking for somebody to go, I can see what I need to do about that. And we're continually revising our Power BI content so make it even easier. One click and you're into the actual page you need to go edit that changes the fee or that tells you who you need to go call.
Yeah.
So having everything connected together is the thing that changes the behaviour. Yeah. And it has to be relevant to the person that's looking at it. So different content for different roles, for different grades of management.
Yep.
Rather than taking the approach of everybody sees everything.
Yeah. So it becomes kind of a filter based on role, which is really, really important. Sebastian kind of followed up through with, do you have your own colour standards or follow a particular standard? Do you follow standards for when filling in certain information? So the colour standard, obviously, we've just touched on and covered off on that. It's basically where it's a client requirement, it is, but otherwise it's kind of choose your own adventure. And Cornelius is talking about that as well. So I think that, we've kind of covered off on that, unless you want to add something extra to it.
No, I think we've pretty much covered it.
Well, thank you very much, Rosey. I'm greatly appreciative of you showing off the work that you've been doing at Bond Bryan, and it was good to catch up with you a couple of years ago in person and talk to you about the stuff that you've been enjoying doing in implementing at Bond Bryan. And thank you very much for sharing it with the audience and being part of the presenters today, and and contributing to the success of this event.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a lot.
It's been great.
So, everyone, we're going to do a stream changeover. So, momentarily up on your screen where this video is, you'll see a button saying to refresh your screen. Once you see that button, please just wait for a couple of moments, maybe about 60 seconds. We're just switching over a stream due to the limitations of Vimeo streaming for too long. We're doing things against technology here. We're fighting it. So please bear with us as we change over, and we will see you again in 10 minutes time with the next session. Thanks a lot.